Archaeodeath with Professor Howard Williams, bringing the past to life, just in time for its own funeral.
Hey Archaeodeath fans, Professor Howard Williams here. Now previously I've talked about the importance of investigating funerary sites in a responsible and ethical way, and archaeologists are continuing that conversation about how we do mortuary archaeology in an appropriate and responsible and professional fashion when actually we're always in the public eye. Everything we do, all the research we undertake is always open to scrutiny, and it's very easy for mortuary archaeology to be called ghoulish or tomb raiders and to sort of pander to popular sensational agendas about investigating funerary sites. Now, especially when we're dealing with stakeholder communities and native communities, indigenous communities around the world, these issues are very sensitive and very ongoing in terms of not only our field investigations, but also our museum curation and display, whether it's appropriate to retain materials in museums or in laboratories, in teaching collections, and how and when we publish mortuary archaeology. Should we use images? Should we use plans of sites? And in some North American and South American contexts, archaeologists don't include any images at all because it's seen as disrespectful to indigenous communities, descending communities of the groups being investigated. Now, for me, there's so many double standards in all of this, and it's important to say that in a society where you can go on the news, you can watch every fictional representation, whether it's a zombie apocalypse, a horror movie, or an action-packed adventure, and you can see slaying after slaying after slaying. When you can go on social media and see live events of people harming themselves or killing each other apart with just a section, maybe with a warning, or maybe just a section taken out of the actual death. Gruesome things one can see in our society and that are sanctioned. It seems rather ridiculous that trained experts and professionals are criticised for doing their job of investigating funerary sites where the people are long dead and no physical harm can come to them. But of course it's not so easy and it's not so simple, and we don't work to the same standards as the journalists or indeed randomers with cameras. We have to maintain and think about the range of different groups that might be affected by our content, our activities, our practices in the field, in the lab, in the classroom, and also when we publish in academic context and in public engagement. So it's not so easy to say, hey, look, everyone else is doing it, we've got to be much more, we can do the same. We've got to be much more sensitive and respectful of what we do with the remains of past human beings and their associated mortuary context. Now, having said that, the flip side is that yes, at one level it seems a bit hypocritical that we've got to be so careful when everyone else is out and doing all manner of grotesque and sensationalist things and media stories. But the other side of it is that archaeologists don't help themselves sometimes by allowing themselves to be associated with or being in news stories that really flag up or promote this idea of archaeologists as tomb raiders, as sort of investigators of plunderers of tombs. A week doesn't go by when I don't see some perhaps inappropriate or news story that represents our practices as a kind of dig to search for historical personages or a search for particular sort of treasures within tombs and graves. And there's so many issues here with not only the way the archaeologists communicate their story, but how also the media take forward that story. And the challenge is, of course, that we don't control the message. We can't always control what journalists and people say and evaluate about our work. And so we're always going to be open to this problem. Having said that, there are some easy, really important lessons we can learn, things not to do if we want to be taken seriously as in our investigations of funerary sites, whether it be early 20th century, mid 20th century, or ancient, dating back to early prehistory. One thing we need to be always aware of, whether it's on social media content, public engagement or so on, is to make sure that we provide a clear rationale of why we're doing the work. We're not just in search of a dead king, we're not just in search of some interesting treasure, we're interested in some key research questions, and the public aren't stupid, and I think that it's very easy, even in a soundbite social media context, to explain why we're doing it and what we hope to find. Then, likewise, when we actually do find things, giving the context, the historical context for the materials, explaining what the finds are, what the discoveries and insights might be, and why they're important, why they're not important just because, look, we found stuff and it's the first or the oldest, but what this tells us about broader stories about the human past, both living and dying in past societies around the world. And it's so easy just to leave things to hanging with we've discovered stuff, we've uncovered something, and for me that is another problem. So rationale and context are some things that are a real challenge for us, particularly when images are taken out of context of early Anglo-Saxon burials that were disturbed by a pipeline, or indeed an excavated early Roman body from Pompeii with rocks falling on top of it and gets turned into a meme and people joke about it. Archaeologists aren't responsible for all of that, and the images are taken out of context, but we can provide a rationale for why we do the work and the contexts of the discoveries and insights. And linked to that is a third point I want to make. We can avoid a lot of sensationalism and misrepresentation if not only we provide rationale and context, but we provide a story, a trail in at least two senses, a story that people can understand what this tells us about the past, and the narrative. The narrative might be about our techniques, our methods of discovery, or the narrative might be about what we learn about past societies, but either way a story, but also beyond that, a trail in the sense of an avenue where people can go from the clickbait, they can go from the headlines and find out more information. And many, increasingly with the digital world, this is really easy to do. You can have a website, a static website, further information on social media pages, sitting behind the clickbait story, so that if people want to find out more, if they feel a bit outraged or disturbed by the way the funerary archaeology was done, then you can learn that maybe this was done ahead of development and the graves would have been destroyed if the archaeologists hadn't excavated them. Maybe you could find out about the insights into ancient diseases that were uncovered on this site that will help us understand the history of disease and therefore in turn the future of disease. So there's all sorts of ways in which we can provide a trail leading to further information, and it's shocking how press releases and some news stories do this incredibly well and some do it incredibly badly, and that can actually alleviate a lot of our problems. My overall takeaway point from this video is that if we're going to do public archaeology of death, to engage people, to question and critique, we shouldn't be creating just an anodyne friendly world that doesn't challenge expectations and doesn't get people engaged with problematic and troublesome issues such as cannibalism, human sacrifice, complex burial rituals that are very different from our own expectations. We shouldn't shirk away from that material, but we can do a lot to stop sensationalizing it by giving a rationale, a context, and then a trail or narrative about our work, and how we did it, or about the information we find out about, by providing depth content to allow people to find out more. And the public have a thirst for that. And that's the final point I want to finish with, is this idea that morbid curiosity is something we should avoid in mortuary archaeology, that morbid curiosity is dirty, it's low, it's something that archaeologists should avoid cultivating. Sensationalism is where you take things out of context and glorify grim and grisly or disgusting things, and that's what I do disagree with. But morbid curiosity is something different, and I think that actually morbid curiosity, an interest in past death cultures, an interest in human mortality, is not something that's aberrant or strange or disgusting. It's something that we should all be concerned about, whether we have a personal faith, whether we're atheists, whatever our research background, whatever our cultural background. We should be fostering as archaeologists that morbid curiosity, that interest in death, past and present. And we do that well, or we do that badly. And we do it well by providing rationale, context and a trail. And if we don't do it, if we do it badly, we just leave people with a few images and a few anecdotes and we tell them nothing more. So that's our choice as professionals, and we need to think very carefully about how we do it better and how we do it responsibly. But it's not about shirking our responsibility to show insights and discoveries from the ancient past, to show funerary remains in museums and in social media and in publications and in field work. It's not about avoiding it and being anodyne and banal. It's about engaging people with exciting stories where they can find out more, and giving a clear rationale of why we're doing the work and the context it reveals.
Sadly, we're all going to die. But while you're waiting, why not follow Archaeodeath? Subscribe now on YouTube.